Now that we have a quorum, I call the Bethany City Council and Bethany Public Works Authority emergency called meeting for Monday, July 22nd, 2019. It's 5 p.m. Would you please rise for the flag salute and for prayer, please? Mr. Todd, will you lead us in the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, I thank you for your wisdom. I thank you for courage. I thank you for insight. And I thank you that we come together as a council team and as a city to find solutions to what we face. We thank you, Father God, for your hand of protection upon each and every citizen. And we give you all the glory, honor, and praise in Jesus' name. Amen. Item 1, before we have a discussion, item 1 is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Bethany declaring an emergency as a result of a treated water supply issue due in part to the reduction in the number of available water wells, authorizing the purchase of treated water from the City of Oklahoma City or any of its public trust in an amount sufficient to meet the daily requirements of the City of Bethany, authorizing the interim city manager to negotiate a contract for the purchase of treated water from the City of Oklahoma City or any of its public trust, authorizing the city manager to implement the provisions of Resolution Number 1504, adopting a water conservation policy and schedule, as well as all further water rationing policies that he deems necessary, including a ban on outdoor watering, providing for termination and extension of its provisions of the resolution, and authorizing the interim city manager to carry out all applicable provisions. First, I'd like to just say that tonight's meeting is not a blame session or to talk about what has or has not been done. This is a meeting for us to give citizen-specific numbers and for council to make some decisions moving forward. We did not get here overnight, and we will not solve this overnight. So you know, from what we can tell and what I was told, the last emergency meeting was called in 2015, and it was to deal with this very same issue. I've got some numbers from Tom Seymour, our water plant supervisor, that I want to read and give to you before we open this up for council discussion. We use between 2.5 and 3 million gallons of water a day as a community. Actually, it is the 2,600,000 to 2,800,000 gallons a day at peak times. Our daily production capabilities are 2,380,000 gallons a day at maximum. That means we're running in a deficit of 220,000 to 420,000 gallons a day. Essentially, we're draining our savings. Storage capacity that we have here in the city is 5,500,000 gallons. You can't actually use 100% of the water tanks because you can't drain them completely dry. The way they're made, I guess. So the maximum available is about 85%, or 4,675,000 gallons. In my opinion, we're here tonight, and priority number 1 is to establish a short-term fix, deciding on a solid plan of attack, and setting the physical and financial strategy to accomplish this set plan. I also would like to begin the discussion as well tonight for priority number 2, as I see it, and that's establishing a long-term solution One thing I think we should be doing is obviously continuing to search for new wells, well sites, testing that water, et cetera, which is exactly what our city engineer had been doing all along. We've yet to find a location that is not testing for pollutants. Item 2, in my opinion, is look for possible locations and estimates for new water storage tanks. From what I understand, are extremely expensive. 3 is establish odd, even lawn watering ordinance for 100% compliance 100% of the time. I believe Oklahoma City does that, and that's just the standard. Also, we are going to have to address the rates to be able to cover all the cost in dealing with this situation, as well as the continued rise of the cost of just operating our city. I will say that this situation has shed light on 2 different areas. One is the fact that we need to set a policy and procedure of communicating info to our citizens in a more proficient manner. We have the call bank that was utilized. I know many people received phone calls. We need to further this effort and look into ways, and I know staff has already begun to do that. Item 2 that shed light on is we need a registry of who is actually on well water. And I also know that staff has already begun that, compiling the information. So with that, I would like to open it up for council discussion or questions.
Yes, if I may start, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I think one thing for clarification's sake is the numbers that the mayor given are accurate. But it's important to understand in the spring, fall, and the wintertime, our daily consumption rates are about 1.8 million. So what this amounts to is over 1 million gallons per day more based on one factor, watering lawns, period. There is no other reason. We can't refill reservoirs. We don't have reservoirs. We only have so many storage tanks. The pumps will only pump so much water a day. All the information is accurate, but the critical element is that 1 million or 1.2 million per day that we're seeing now in a drought period when people are bound and determined to keep their trees and their lawns green is what's causing this problem. And I think kind of a perfect storm this year was we got all this rain. Everybody's lawns look great, their trees look great, their foliage looks great, and they say, I'm going to keep it that way. And I'm still driving around town, and I'm seeing people utilizing their sprinklers, their lawn sprinklers, in the middle of the day. About 60% of that water, when it's 90 degrees, is going straight back into the atmosphere. It's being evaporated. It's never getting to the root of that tree or that grass. It is incumbent that we follow the ordinance in regard to rationing. What we've got to slow down our use of water for sprinkling. We have plenty of water in this city to provide for our daily operations, cooking, cleaning, drinking, etc. We do not have the capacity today because of our well shortage to supplement people utilizing that water to keep their foliage alive. It's just a fact. It's that simple. I know it sounds too simple. Stop using your lawn sprinklers. There's 3 people on my street, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, sprinklers running full bore.
I'm told that it's about 10 to 15% of the water that we consume is for cooking and drinking. The rest is for exactly what you said, watering the lawn. And you and I spoke the other day. The reason why this is so important is because, and we need to address this and fix this, is because in the chance of a fire, a house fire, your house catches on fire, how much water can putting out a house fire actually consume?
We could go through several million gallons of water in just a couple of hours. We could empty our storage tanks in a matter of hours on a major conflagration. Now, those of you that don't know me, I'm speaking from a professional sense, being with the fire service for 27 years in this city. When you start pumping aerial devices at 1,000 gallons per minute, and you may have 4 or 5 of them trying to put out a fire, it may take 4 or 5 hours. You could put millions of gallons of water on the ground, absolutely. That's the worst case scenario. We don't even want to think about that. That would be catastrophic at this point in time. on top of everything else.
Are there any questions from council members that you would like to ask at this point?
Mr. Mayor, I think your initial comments related to a temporary solution and then a long-term solution are things that we should discuss. I think for a temporary solution, there was some discussion related to purchasing water from the city of Oklahoma City. We have that valve capability, and that might be the initial approach at this point, to use our well water in conjunction with the city of Oklahoma City's water in order to meet the need, and then set up some kind of policy or procedure which will not only inform the residents as to why we're doing this and how much it's going to cost, but then a time frame as to when that's going to happen. And I guess my question is, where are we in attempting to negotiate some type of a deal with the city of Oklahoma City to try to make that work?
Councilman Palmer, we met with the Oklahoma City Water Board on Friday, and they're aware of our situation. First, I want to thank the previous council that had the foresight to put those valves in place, because without that additional water from Oklahoma City, we would be in a dire situation. But we are in, we've been in contact with them. We're going to look at some numbers over the next 2 or 3 weeks and see if we can work out something. We are on a take-or-pay contract right now with Oklahoma City, and that means that we take water at the most expensive rate that Oklahoma City sells it. We're looking at a different way to do that, where we can cover our peak times in the summer, but maybe by some steady small amount throughout the year in order to be able to do that. We're going to look at the numbers on it and see which way might be the best, but I think we're compelled to do something along these lines now to at least solve this on the short term and give the council time to do something over the next 2 or 3 years. If we had the go-ahead right now to drill wells and embellish our water supply, it would take at least a couple of years to get those online. So I think we have to do something in the short term to, excuse me, to address this problem.
And again, for those who don't know, we are in this situation because of contaminants that made their way from Oklahoma City Airport property, specifically Rockwell International and Gulfstream International, that migrated into our south well field. And as we see contaminants, as wells test positive for any contaminants, we've taken the position as a city that we don't want to send any known contaminants to our citizens, and so we shut a well down. And so we have 26 wells total that the city of Bethany owns, and we are down to 12. They're running at max capacity, and at this time of year, as the numbers show, we are unable to pull enough out because we're always behind the gun with the amount that's being used at this time of year, mainly to water lawns. And so that's the history of it, and agreed the short-term fix is what we need to definitely come out of here tonight with. And as far as a game plan, then we need to execute the game plan. And it's not free, obviously, and we need to deal with that and attack that as well. And if we need to start on a long-term solution as well, that's something council definitely has to begin to have these discussions and create a game plan for a long-term solution and present it to the citizens, because it's going to cost. But if we want to remain autonomous, our autonomy as a city, that costs money. And we have to invest in ourselves and start dealing with these things in order to remain self-sufficient. And that's the bottom line. We want this that we're talking about tonight is a short-term solution as far as the Oklahoma City water. We don't want that to be long-term in any way, shape, or form. And so, does anybody have any questions moving forward?
I have
I
a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
Rather than a question. I agree with you on this severity of our needing to have a long-term solution, or solutions, I should say. But in addition to this purchasing of the Oklahoma City water, I think the staff and the city needs to be more due diligent in looking out for leaks and leaking water fire hydrants and those sorts of things. I am hearing from citizens, and I have turned one in myself that's still in the middle of a street and not fixed over 3 months ago. We need to be more diligent to those, because once they hit the surface, the damage underneath can be huge. I've had experienced that on our property in this city. So I think in addition to taking these steps, we need to be more due diligent in those types of repairs and needs to stop the water flowing freely.
Mr. Mayor, I don't mean to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Matt.
Thank you. Just have a question, just reading through the resolution that would expire in 60 days. And I have full faith in the interim city manager in this, but I do just have a question and a bit of ambiguity on the negotiating power and negotiating of the contracts and the long term of that. Will council get to see that and be involved in those discussions? So just a bit of quick clarity on that, please.
Yes, it was. It is not my intention to finalize the contract, but merely to negotiate and bring to council some options that they would have to finalize the contract. So that would be up to the council.
Thank you.
Mr. Palmer?
Mr. Mayor, I think at one point prior to this week, and when we had the rationing, the council did request that the city engineer go about finding a solution, and one of those was to hire a company to audit our water system to, for lack of a better term, find our leakage. And I think it did come back, and I think the conclusion was at the end of the study that our water system was okay to the extent that there was not a lot of leakage that they could find. Am I correct in that?
I seem to recall that in regards to leakage, there were some citizens that are taking water without paying for the water or being metered for water. So there's some areas like that that need to be addressed. People are getting free water. And I do know there are some leaks out there, but I don't remember exactly what that report.
Well, I think Mr. Caton, I don't know if he's here today.
He's
but,
not.
He would be able to provide information related to the study that was done that I think we approved, and we allocated funds because the idea was at some point, if we do have a problem with our water system, let's figure out where we can fix it. Maybe we can save some water to the extent that that would prevent us from having to drill an additional well. So that was an available option, and I think that the firm came in, made a report, and determined that at this point there weren't a lot of major repairs that needed to be done to the extent that they could improve or allow us to capture more water on our current system. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that that's the conclusion that they provided. So that was one option that we looked at, and then obviously we're always looking for available well sites, water rights, and things like that by way of our city attorney, David Davis, and then we're trying to actively pursue that. I guess the other question is, and we might want to talk about that, is the status of the pending lawsuit related to the Port Authority. And from what I understand, that's ongoing litigation, and it's in federal court, and there was some type of resolution with the Oklahoma City Airport Trust. And I don't know to the extent we can elaborate on that, but I think the public obviously wants to know. It's a public record, but we can say that we settled with the City of Oklahoma City Airport Trust for an amount related to the lawsuit, but the other pending defendants are still involved in the lawsuit, and discovery is ongoing, and we've been back and forth. And we've hired our attorneys. They've obviously hired theirs, and litigation takes a while, especially under these circumstances. So that's actively being pursued by the city, by our attorneys, to try to reach some resolution with those parties who were at the airport and operated at the airport for some period of time.
Yeah, I know the council that was in place prior to my election and Palmer's election are the ones that hired the firm to represent the city, and they are experts. And so we are in good hands, but this is not small claims court, and so it is a big deal, and it is ongoing, and we have no idea how long it will last. And I know people have been commenting saying, how come they can't get a settlement yet? What are they doing, wasting all this time to be able to fix this? It is not that simple, and it is not cheap. And so we're looking at, and staff has been looking at, how to address this issue this summer. Last summer, we almost got to this point, but we only got to stage 3. This summer, we very quickly went to stage 4, which shocked every single one of us. And so that's the reality. And so if you are not aware, we've said this many times, Councilmember Hunter mentioned it at the last council meeting, we don't get our water from the lake. We don't get it from runoff. We have access to aquifers that are 70 to 90 feet below the ground, and we have to pump it out with our wells. And again, because we're down to less than 50% of our wells running at full capacity, we still can't keep up this time of year. And so, which is why we're here.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to comment on a couple of things that were said, just for clarification's sake again. I do have knowledge in regard to that study, and we were consistent with the national average as far as fugitive water loss. So one part of that. Number two, the study was also to determine, do we have a lot of water out there that's not being properly billed, which is not an issue right now. Whether they're paying for it or not is irrelevant at this point, but that was a second part of that water study. Number three, you were beginning to bring up a point. What happens if we have another pump go down on our system? What happens if we have a major break in a supply line? The cost of our water that we're buying from Oklahoma City is going to double or triple potentially. So, we have 26 wells out there, 12 usable wells. We had 26 as a contingency, as a redundancy, to have plenty of water, plenty of pumping capacity, and we've reduced that by over 50%. We've got to also plan for contingencies. Fugitive water loss isn't going to get it. The only solution to this problem long-term is more wells. And as our city grows, and our anticipation is that we're going to have more industry, more commercial opportunities in this city, we're going to need more water. So the long-term solution is, and I would put it to this council, that this is a priority. It is a priority over everything else that we might consider right now. And I suggest that we get to moving on that and find a long-term solution to go with this short-term solution.
Absolutely.
Mayor,
Mr. Knapp.
I'm sure this is probably a question for the city engineer, but do we have any idea how many sites have been tested or deemed unusable or contaminated to date?
I don't know the number of sites that have been tested. Yeah.
That's city engineer.
Just from memory, Councilman Knapp, I think it's been either 2 or 3 that they've tested.
Okay.
2 or 3 is what he believes have been tested that did not turn out to be usable. Yeah, tested to possibly be new wells.
Sites,
Yeah.
locations.
Mr. Mayor, part of this resolution here says authorizing the acting city manager to negotiate with Oklahoma City. I was under the impression that he had that authority anyway already. Help me to understand this. Is that not correct, Mr. Smart? Help me to understand.
It's my understanding that it takes council approval on any contract for the purchase of water.
Is the existing contract that we've used with Oklahoma City void? Do we not have a present contract in place?
The contract that we had was written in 2009. It was a 9-year contract. It extended 1 year, and it actually terminated in June of this year. But about November, December of last year, Oklahoma City sent us a letter terminating that contract and sent along a copy of their latest ordinance with new water rates and new terms. So that's what we're under right now.
I just make a comment. Long-term, we do have in the budget this year money to move forward in contingencies with water wells. And I hope we can work on a plan for that. If I recall right, it was in the millions of dollars contingencies for that. So sorry. So we did put in the budget this year 4 wells, so I hope we move forward with that. And then short term, what my constituents are voicing to me concerns are, since we are buying Oklahoma City water now, can we not start watering the yards again?
I had heard that the tanks are where? I mean, because we had talked about that today.
Okay, I've been in contact with Tom Seymour, our water superintendent, all weekend and today, and our tanks are all 80 to 85% full. There's some triggers in here about what we do on our water rationing, and we're considering that. I mean, we may relax those very soon if we're going to buy Oklahoma City water anyway.
The numbers that I got from Steve Caton, our city engineer, stated that when we're watering at the rate that we're watering right now, our tank capacities are going to drop by about 6% per day. So do the math.
We'll be filling them up almost weekly.
And what is our weekly, what does it cost us to put 60% back in one of those tanks with Oklahoma City? What are we paying right now today?
If we were to pay the published rate right now, it would be $12.50 per thousand gallons,
And what do the
is
citizens of
exorbitant.
Bethany pay for water?
about $3.25. So it would be triple the rate. That's why we need to execute another contract. We can't afford to pay this exorbitant rate.
And that water is not of the quality of water that we have when we're pulling water out of our good wells. So we're paying 300% more for water of lesser quality. Again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but there's a simple solution to this problem. We don't ration water in the wintertime, or in the fall, or in the spring. It only happens when we turn all those sprinklers on. We've got to have help from everybody in this community. It's imperative.
Stage 3 rationing is odd, even watering, correct? No?
I was under the impression we were at stage 4.
We are at stage
Okay.
4. I'm just asking,
We are at stage 4 presently, which we have, that's.
I was asking odd, even watering like Oklahoma City is on across the board. What stage is that?
Okay, that would be stage 1, which is mandatory odd even. What we're considering is maybe stage 2, which is 2 days a week watering. And then it's dictated by the number on your address. But that would allow people to water their lawns at that point on a limited basis.
Is it safe to assume that we're going to get input from Mr. Caton and Mr. Seymour, and we're going to develop a plan, and we're going to identify, when we start dropping, we're going to revisit this. If we have to go to stage 3, stage 4, whatever has to happen, rather than just say, okay, we're already buying water from Oklahoma City, it's just going to cost us another couple of $100,000.
Mr. Mayor,
The triggers are automatic that Mr. Caton developed as far as what causes us to move from one stage to
So we
another.
have not changed those numbers. Those numbers will be consistent with this particular episode. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I mean,
Yeah.
the long-term plan, I think we've talked about the short-term effectively. I know there are probably questions out there, but I think if we can move to the idea or process of developing a long-term plan, Councilman Herron has mentioned we do have money in the budget, but I think it would be beneficial for everybody to understand where we're at and how we need to get there. And in my mind, I think we need to have a required savings in our budget for this particular item, to the extent that every portion of a certain portion of our budget should be allocated to maintain this. I think that that's something that could be done and could be effective as we move forward, taking the money that's in the allocated budget now and then, projecting those expenses over a period of time. Because if you're a municipality, other municipalities are always looking for water rights, new wells, things like that, because water is a precious commodity. And I would like to kind of get the discussion going related to the long-term project. I think that's something we should consider as we move forward. But the long-term process is to identify areas where we can purchase and drill wells. I wish Mr. Caton was here to kind of give us some parameters on how we could do that, but I'd like to open that discussion up to the council for any suggestions and allow the public to hear where we're thinking we should go at this point. I mean, obviously, we're going to have to revamp our system. We're going to have to determine how much it's gonna cost to implement these changes, and then we're gonna have to propose that to the residents, because I think ultimately the rates are gonna go up. Initially, now they're gonna go up with Oklahoma City, but over a period of time, we can get back on track and get to a point where we can hopefully get where we need to be at a rate that, we can pay. I mean, I'd like to open it up and see what council has to say about any of those issues.
In addition to the wells, I think we also need to address the storage, which has been mentioned. The wells themselves, I think we have leases that just need to be dealt with on those 26 wells, get them solidified. It's my understanding that even if we have the wells, I'm not sure that the lines from the wells go to the plant, do they? Are those lines already in place, or are those going to have to be done as well?
That would be part of the infrastructure.
So we're talking huge projects on each one of those. How are we going to pay for it? Well, we're not going to be able to depend on the citizens to fit the bill totally up front. That doesn't happen. You're going to be talking probably grant money, bond money, which is going to take the citizens' approval to do. And I think it's very vital that we keep the citizens informed, upfront, transparent on every step of the way that we can. I understand that with
Absolutely.
litigation, that's not always possible. We have to be choosy with our words. But as far as this part of it, we can be very transparent. We may have to make some provisions in our budget to do so as well. And so those are, until we get the figures, we can't know. But I can tell you from, and I've mentioned this with you, KP, or Mayor, that with the library, the people were engaged on that bond issue, and you will not get a successful bond issue unless you engage them on this, so
Well-
that they know what they're going to be paying for and how they're going to be paying for it.
I will say this, that's completely 100% my intent, is to be completely transparent and get the citizens engaged, and that's what we've been doing. I'm in full agreement with you on that. And it may take bond issues, revenue bonds, geo bonds, whatever it takes. We're going to have to deal with this because we all want to have our autonomy, that our city is the city of Bethany, but we have to be self-sufficient in order to be able to do that, and that costs money.
We do need somebody to be looking at, right now, we don't even need those figures yet, to start looking at federal, state, local water resource board bonds that we can begin to look to see if we can tap into those. That's something we can start right now.
Right.
Mayor,
Yes.
just in conjunction with what you said, Councilmember Larson, I know that the OWRB has low-interest loans. They may have some grants available, so I think that might be something we need to look at. Or not might, we need to look at.
Right. Regardless of what we do, we will be paying for it. That's something we're eating that. We are going to have to pay for it, and it requires all of us doing our part, whether it's not watering our lawns so often, and we're going to be paying for it. So that's just the facts.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question. I heard Mr. Smart say that what we buy from Oklahoma City is costing us 3 times more than what we're selling it for. Are we adjusting the rates for this interim period that we're selling for? Or are we still losing money for every gallon we're selling?
There is a provision in the ordinance that the council passed back in 2016 that gives us the ability to tack on a surcharge that we hope is going to cover this. I may have to come back to you and ask you for a different number if it's not sufficient. But part of our negotiation with Oklahoma City is to get that rate down. And they've agreed that if we get something done fairly soon, that they'll adjust those rates so we may not experience that high cost. But I also want to say that we have a call into Oklahoma Water Resources Board now, trying to get a meeting next week to explore what financing and what other options might be available to us to at least start that process.
Well, like any problem on any level, Mr. Mayor, if you have a plan, you can rely on the plan and you can set goals and deadlines to implement the plan. And I think if the public is concerned and understands that we are creating a plan with specific deadlines and goals to be met, rest assured we're doing everything we can in order to avoid this again. So I think that that's where we need to go and how we need to do this. We may not like the plan. There will be a lot of discussion related to the plan, but hopefully we will not have stage 4 water rationing this time next year, because we are implementing a process to prevent this from happening. I think if we're all committed to doing that, and we're all committed to eliminating this problem, I think we can push on and move forward. But the thing is, it's been here a while, and I'm concerned that the focus will diminish once we get into the fall and winter, where we don't have to think about it. The process needs to continue monthly, and we need to really push this so that it doesn't fall through the cracks, and we're actively trying to find a solution.
It's exactly the reason why we called this meeting, to get the information to the public and to have council having this discussion to create the plan and get us pointed in the right direction. And then it's all a matter of implementing the plan to success. And once the plan is in place, it is going to be what it's going to be. We just got to get to that point so we can start taking care of this issue.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Just a couple things. I think it's great to have this tonight, to be able to share with the public. Various things online and social media are easy to have half information or not be able to get questions directly from the source sometimes, and it becomes a bit muddled, so I appreciate that tonight. I would just give feedback just from personal experience that meetings not start before 5:30, just a bit of preference with work and professional schedules and things for the citizens as well to make it. But would also like to propose an informational session where the city engineer can be present and other things. There's a lot of questions tonight that are hard to know the full intent on, so I'd love to see that happen as soon as possible.
I respect that, and but would also like to say that we wanted to get this emergency meeting going as soon as possible, because it is a serious matter, even if it is a couple hours earlier. And we had to wait. We would have done it even earlier just so we can get things moving and still get the information to the public, but to get the city manager moving forward with a game plan. But we had to wait till we knew we had a quorum. So, but I agree, it is not easy to get to a meeting.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I agree with Mr. Goodwin. I think it's imperative that we get the city engineer, our utilities director involved in this. I think our planning can just go so far. The first step is to identify what options we have. What is the feasibility of option 1, 2, or 3? Costs are going to come, but first off, we got to decide what direction are we going. What is the solution to this problem? And we need professional minds to be making that decision. And I think Mr. Caton and Mr. Seymour would be the first two, and whoever else would be in that process, whether it be an elected official or a citizen or two that has some expertise in that area. But get the ball rolling to determine what are our options.
I will say, just so everybody knows and is clear, Mr. Caton would have been here tonight, but he had a death in the family, and so that is the reason why he's not here. But we were not going to hold up this meeting because council needed to have the numbers as well as the public, and we needed to point the ship in the right direction. But I fully agree with you.
Well, I would make the suggestion that this be an agenda item on our next meeting, and that we establish that very the plan and the inclusion of those people in that plan, and to give them direction to start on this immediately. It is critical and pertinent that they start as soon as possible and get the results back to the council as soon as possible.
August 6th is the next council meeting, but you're not referring to holding off on this, are you?
Oh, absolutely not.
No,
No, absolutely not.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I'd make it a standing agenda item for every council meeting. And I'm encouraged that out of the whole process, the city and staff is going to set a policy and procedure to communicate with residents. If it's a standing agenda item related to the well progress as to where we are, the residents will know where we are and what we're doing. If we're not doing anything, we obviously have to report on that. But if we have some information, we can push forward and give them an opportunity to understand the process. Believe it or not, everybody in this room is going to know a whole lot more about wells and how we, process our water in Bethany. And I think you'll understand exactly where we're coming from once you get that knowledge base. And I invite you to participate, because you need to know this stuff, because ultimately we're going to pay for it. I'm going to pay for it. You're going to pay for it. So I'm encouraged by that. And with that, I'd make a motion to adopt resolution number 1555 as presented, to allow the city manager to begin his process of declaring an emergency and giving him authority to negotiate contract with the city of Oklahoma City.
I'll second that.
Please cast your votes.
Before we adjourn tonight, I just want to get the council's input on this. It's obvious that we're going to have to purchase some water from Oklahoma City for the short term, and we think we can negotiate a contract that will result in an incremental increase in the rate, not the $12.50 that we're talking about here. My question to you, and I'd like your opinion on this, is should we continue this strict water rationing or relax it back to something where people can start watering their lawns, knowing that it's going to cost them a little more money?
Do we need to vote on an increase before it can happen as a council, which would have to be on the next agenda?
Yes.
Okay, so if that's said, for right now, for the next 2 weeks, I would prefer, I don't know how the citizens feel about it, but I think we need to stay where we are until we can see what's happened over almost a 2-week period to see if we even need to do the rise. And I know we're going to have to keep using Oklahoma City water, but let's hope those negotiations go well. And maybe, I know when we raised the water rates before, that we did so knowing that during the summer months we were going to have to buy that water. So it was in the projection process. Obviously, at this point now, that's not enough. We understand that. But the citizens have really been, in my opinion, have been browbeat in a lot of ways, the way they were notified and the drasticness that was required. I mean, it had to be done. There's nothing to put, to avoid that. But I'm thinking, let's look after 2 weeks and see how well this plan has worked before we go back to
Mr.
stage
Hunter?
2 or 3.
Yes, if I may, Mr. Caton and Mr. Tom Seymour, they monitor this every day. He looks at the numbers every morning. They know down to the gallon how much was used out of our storage system. We can see a trend. If people have slowed down on their watering, guess what? It may hold steady. We may not have to buy any more water. If they continue to water, I can tell you exactly what's going to happen. If they continue to water, the tank volumes are going to go down and we're going to buy more water. So the discussion, I think, here at this point, and the decision is, are we willing to pay premium price for water, to put water on Bermuda that loves sun and is not going to die? A few days is not going to make that much difference.
Mr. Herron?
A number of us actually have fescue grass, which is a considerably difference between Bermuda. When fescue dies, it's dead. It's gone. The constituents that have reached out to me would prefer to pay the surge charge. I mean, they would prefer not to, but they would rather have the option to be able to continue watering. Even if it is still at a ration. And I believe, and I wish we had our surcharge policy in place, the surcharge pricing was only for the high-end users. So the people who are not watering are not paying anything additional.
Right.
I don't recall what that level was, but it was only for the people using 10+ thousand gallons, and don't quote me on that because I don't recall. 20,000
I think
gallons
it was
plus?
20,000.
So it wasn't for the people who weren't watering. So if you're conservative, you're not watering, you're not gonna pay anymore because you're not using anymore. You're not using our storage.
Right. Mr. Knapp?
I only had one question. I didn't get it in earlier. Do we know if there have been any sites that have been cleared of contamination that we could feasibly drill? I know drilling is a long process, but I asked the question if, how many were contaminated, but, so that's a question, but I tend to agree with Mr. John here, Heron, and to allow people the option to water once a week. That,
Or more.
once or twice for fescue lawns in particular. I've had people reach out to me about fescue lawns. So I have Bermuda and it's already brown and crispy, so I'm not concerned about it. It'll come back another year.
I've been reached out to by Bethany Public Schools who had fertilized their soccer field the day before, I believe it was, this happened. And they are holding off on watering, hoping that they are going to be allowed to water or that the good Lord dumps a bunch of rain on their field before it burns up. I also don't necessarily like watching a bunch of money and flowers and flower beds go to waste. My yard dies, you know, we got Bermuda, and I just assume not have to mow it anymore, quite honestly. But I personally would like to see moving to a stage, since we are going to be buying Oklahoma City water, it seems like at some level anyway, to where they could water a couple times a week. Stage two. That's my preference.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's fair to say that I'm not going to win a prize at the state fair for my tomato plants this year. I'm in favor of trying to find an alternative to allow the residents to water in some capacity. I'm concerned that we got to this point, and I don't want to get there again, but I want to rely on our experts who know what's going on to give us an up-to-date plan of action to get to that point. I think if they look at all the variables and they tell us, I think we can go to once a week or 2 times a week, I think that's feasible. But again, by all means, I don't want this to happen again if we can avoid it. So that's my primary concern, and I think that's probably in the middle. But I think we do need to be able to water our lawns, or I'm sorry, not our lawns, but use 1 or 2 watering opportunities in a week would be fair in my opinion.
At least do it at night. Don't do it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Mr.
And I-
Dodd?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to echo John Heron's sentiments. If a residence, and there are studies that say how much water an average residence uses for domestic purposes. And if they're using that much, blessings on them. But those that continues to water, those are the ones, in my book, that would need to be charged that surcharge. And I'm like John Heron, I have fescue, requires water. And if it's gone, it's gone. So,
Mr. Goodwin?
I don't have anything further to add.
You don't care either way? I will say that whatever is decided upon, from what I understand, the fine, if you are watering outside of the rationing policies and you're not on well water, which is a very easy test that they can do in a matter of seconds, it's a $500 a day fine, and with the other added taxes and whatnot from the courts, it is $585 total. And so it could get extremely expensive. I believe if you were watering, even though you weren't consuming a whole lot of water, if you were watering and it wasn't your turn to water, that would be a very expensive water bill right there just for doing it, being out of compliance. So do we, is this a? Yeah, okay.
Is this not going to take care of itself when Mr. Caton looks at the usage? That's going to determine what stage we're at. Is that a correct assumption?
It's a little more complicated now because we had the Oklahoma City water coming in. So we were able to fill up the tanks over the weekend. Tom told me that he thought the water usage right now was probably somewhere around 2.3 to 2.4 million gallons a day, which is about what our capacity is. If we relax the water standards, we will have to use some Oklahoma City water.
Well,
So that's the question.
A good option.
You know, in our meeting with the Oklahoma City Water Board, they have a conservation specialist that they offered to come out and do seminars for us, and I think that would be a good idea to give us maybe some different ways that to conserve water, when to water, how to water, you know, fixing leaky toilets, all that sort of thing, and we might avail ourselves of that as well.
Again, this evening's emergency meeting was a general discussion to get pointed in the right direction, and on the next council meeting, which is August 6th, we will have specifics, and it will be an agenda item moving forward. So I look forward to hearing some of the findings on, and your report back to council. There was no public hearing item, an emergency meeting, nor citizens addressing the council. If you have anything that you would like to address the council, please return on August 6th to the council meeting, and we'd like to hear what you have to say. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.